Will you pray with me? Holy One, may the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. There are so many to list that I hardly know where to start. It seems that every week there's another one, so maybe I'll just start with the most recent one, Brussels. Ankara, Paris, San Bernardino, Boston. And it seems like it happens the same way every time. I'm always driving in the car when I hear the news. I'm always listening to the radio and somebody says, reports are coming in of an attack in fill in the city. Maybe as many as 30 dead, maybe as many as 80 or 100 dead. They're still counting, they say. And every time it starts, I feel myself hunch over a little there in my car. And it progresses the same way every time. It seems like after some hours or after some days, they say a suspect is in custody or a suspect has been killed. And details of a plot are emerging. Plot after plot after plot. It seems like, and every time there's another one, I feel like I'm hunched over a little more. And that's just me sitting safe in my car, right? I wonder what it's like to be in the places where the bombs go off or where the bullets are flying or where the drones are zooming overhead, what it's like to have to hunch to protect your vital organs or your children. And then I think about Jesus and what happened to him over the last week. I picture him hunched under the betrayal of Judas. Hunched under the lash of the whip. Hunched under the weight of the mocking and the stripping and that crown. I picture him hunched, slumped on the cross. I picture him hunched when they took him down. I picture him hunched over the shoulder of someone who carried him to his grave, so hunched over. And I picture the disciples on that Sunday morning. I picture them there at the grave looking for the corpse of their beloved. And the story writer, John, he really wants you to know that they had to hunch over to look into the grave. They weren't looking up, they weren't looking straight down, they had to bend over, they had to put their bodies into the position that their hearts were in to see whether he was there or not. Peter and the disciple he loved, and Mary. And then when she was alone again, there she was, hunched in a ball on the ground. And I get it, this hunching, you know. Because there doesn't have to be crucifixion on the landscape. There don't have to be bullets in the air or bombs underground to hunch us over, do there? Can't an unexpected announcement from your spouse do the same thing? Can't the news from your boss or from your doctor hunch you over just as surely? Can't addiction bend you to the ground? Can't depression crumple you into a ball? Can't cancer do the same? Do you know the writer Catherine White? She was a lifelong gardener, and she wrote about gardening. She was an editor for The New Yorker, and she was married to E.B. White, he of the children's books and style books. He loved watching her every fall, he would say, plot her spring garden. There, when it was dreary and chill outside, he would look out the window, and there she would be plotting where all those bulbs would go, imagining them springing through the ground in the spring. But near the end of her life, she had congestive heart failure, and it got harder and harder for her. She got more and more hunched over, and he writes of the last time she did this. This is what he writes. As the years went by and age overtook her, there was something comical yet touching in her bedraggled appearance on this awesome occasion. The small, hunched-over figure, her studied absorption in the implausible notion that there would be yet another spring, oblivious to the ending of her own days, which she knew perfectly well was near at hand, sitting there with her detailed chart under those dark skies in the dying October, calmly plotting the resurrection. There are plots, and there are plots. There are the plots hatched by men in dark rooms at secretive times of day. And then there are plots. There are plots planned by warlords around maps, deploying troops and planes far from where they sit. There are those plots, and then there are plots. He was so hunched over by the end, so bent down by the betrayal and the whips and the exhaustion and the scorn. He was bent right in two. And you couldn't see it, even if you had been there, but spread on his lap was a chart. Spread there across his lap was a map the size of the entire world. They thought that he was bent and broken by what they had done. What he was really doing was plotting. They thought that it was betrayal that had bent him in two. What he was really doing was making a plan. They thought that he was bent so low he would never be able to get up. What he was really doing was gathering himself to leap. And when he leapt up on high, it wasn't just he that rose. It started to spread after he did it that first day. There was Mary crumpled at his feet. She couldn't even raise her eyes. She was so bent down, staring at his toes. She didn't even recognize him until he said her name, and then she stood up tall. There are plots, and then there are plots. There's hunched, and then there's ready. There's broken, and then there's gathering yourself for the leap. He sprang up tall, and it wasn't just him, and it wasn't just Mary that did it. It was the same leap that Martin took in the South. They thought he was bent. They thought they were all bent under the weight of dogs and fire hoses, but they were bent over and plodding hard, and they stood up tall. It was the same leap that Desmond took in South Africa. They thought his people were bent forever under the weight of apartheid, but they weren't just bent over, they were plodding, and then they rose up high. There are plots, and then there are plots. There's hunched over, and then there's gathering yourself for the leap. It's what Dorothy Day did when she saw all the people bent over by hunger. She stood up tall and brought them with her. It's what Handel did when he hunched over his composer's book and wrote the most glorious music that ever rang through a church. Somebody here walked into this place hunched over. And I don't know what it is that's weighing you down. But here's what I want to tell you. There's hunched, and then there's ready. There are plots, and then there are plots. And if you walked into this place bent over, hunched over, not sure whether what you had planted would ever see the light of day and whether you would survive to see it, even if it does, here's what I recommend. Use that time bent over, that time when you're staring at your lap anyway. Use it to hatch a plot. Say amen.